name is Zach Jones, although a lot of you probably already know who I am. Welcome back to my channel, but if you're new to my channel, then welcome. I'm going to be doing a video about the skull replicas of predators I've recently been collecting. Now, as many of you know, I've been passionate, fascinated, and bordering on obsessed with the natural world ever since I was a boy. But, of course, I've got a collection of skulls here, and that's going to be important because you can actually learn a lot about animals such as predators and what they do by looking at their skulls and, more importantly, their teeth, which is their dentition. I'm going to start with this one. This is the skull of a pine marten. They're in the weasel family. They may look small, but they are one of the most ferocious predators for their size, and as you can see, they've got really ferocious teeth, like very big canine teeth, and these side teeth called carnassials. And of course, a pine marten can actually tackle prey bigger than itself and have no fear whatsoever. And this one, same family, much bigger. This is a European badger skull. Now, badgers are found throughout Britain, and they are omnivores, which means they eat pretty much anything, like not just plants, but they also and berries, but they will also eat earthworms, insects, insect larvae, or mammals like rodents, rabbits, pretty much anything they can catch. They have a very, very keen sense of smell, as of the nasal cavity, which is quite big. But of course, as you can see right here, they've got ferocious looking teeth. And of course, they've got enormous canine teeth and very sharp carnassials or cheek teeth. And the badger may only be small, but I wouldn't really advise trying to hug one, because there's no doubt if I was to try and get a hold of a badger, it would probably tear me to shreds. Now, we're going to move on to animals from, well, some larger predators. In fact, this one is a puma skull. Now, pumas are in the cat family. They are the largest ranging large carnivore in North America, and well, all the Americas. They're found in North, Central and South America. They have a very broad and stout skull and very big canine teeth, and of course incredibly impressive carnassials, and of course the nasal cavity as well is quite big, so they have a very, very keen sense of smell, but the teeth are always what catch me with this skull, because they're probably nearly about half the length of my little finger, but even so, they are what puma uses to kill its prey, because quite often it will kill its prey, typically by going for the throat to suffocate it, or killing it with a bite to the back of the neck. And of course those teeth are formidable, and I certainly would not want to be attacked by one of these. I can tell you that for sure. Now this one is a dog skull. It's from a wolf. Wolves are the largest of the dog family and one of the most widespread predators. And this is a grey wolf. Of course, right here is where the nasal cavity is, so it has a very, very keen sense of smell. In fact, the wolf's sense of smell is said to be 10 times more powerful than ours. But of course, they also have some ferocious looking teeth. And they've got canine teeth that are about 1.5 inches in length, and of course these stouter teeth at the side are carnassials or cheek teeth. And of course, they're what the wolf uses to bite into bones. If you ever see a dog getting stuck into a bone, it will bring it round to the side of its mouth and crunch away at it, rather than use these teeth at the front, because they're just far too brittle. And of course, the wolf's canine teeth are interlocking, so once it's got a hold of prey, it can leave it with a serious injury. So in America, if a wolf is hunting something as big as an elk, a moose, or a bison, it will typically use these canine teeth to bite at the legs of its prey, and they can quite often leave a 6-inch gash, which will normally lead an animal to bleed to death. Because around here is where the skull connects with the neck and the spine. Of course, here is where the skull joins the spine, but around here are where the neck joints are connected, and they're really, really big, and they serve a massive purpose with how wolves often feed, because quite often when wolves have made a kill, you might have 5 or 6 of these animals all competing for food, so they'll get their teeth stuck into it, and then they'll brace back with their enormous front paws on straight legs, and just shake their heads from side to side, using all the muscularity in their necks to tear out chunks of meat. And of course, compared to the puma skull, the puma skull, as you can see, is very broad and stout, quite muscular, and that's because it mainly uses it to just hold down prey. Whereas the wolf skull is a lot, of course the muzzle is long and fairly slender, and it's got a lot more teeth. In fact, there's about 60 to 68 teeth in a wolf skull, compared to a decent sized cat, like a leopard, which would have about 30 odd teeth. And now we're going to be moving on to the skulls of the largest land carnivores found in the Americas. I've got a black bear skull and a polar bear skull here. I'm going to start with the black bear. Now, black bears are a little bit smaller than a grizzly bear, but of course, as you can see here, they've got enormous nasal cavities, because bears have probably the best sense of smell of any mammal. And of course, they've got some very impressive carnassial teeth at the side, but also wicked-looking canines. But black bears are probably the most choosy of the bears of what they feed on. I mean, most of what they eat during the year is plant matter, like berries, roots and moss, but on occasion they will become predatory, like devouring colonies of ants, and even, like their grizzly bear cousins, catching salmon. And that's where these teeth can come into handy. And of course, unfortunately, in many parts of America, black bears are coming into cities where they're going through people's garbage and occasionally stealing food off them. But that's mainly down to the fact that during the summer, when they wake up from hibernation, they haven't eaten for months, they're lean, hungry and ready to eat, and with their incredible sense of smell, they could actually pick up the scent of rubbish from miles away, and that draws them into cities in America. But this is the skull of the largest land carnivore, the polar bear. Now, the polar bear often vies with the grizzly bear for the title of the largest land carnivore, when actually, grizzly bears, for a lot of the year, they aren't even carnivorous. In fact, most of what the grizzly bear will eat is roots, berries, moss, and but of course the polar bear is purely carnivorous. It's probably the only purely carnivorous bear. Of course, the thing that always catches my attention is the nose. In fact, the nasal cavity is very, very large, and that's because this bear has probably the best sense of smell. In fact, it can actually pick up the scent of a seal from over 20 kilometers away. And of course, polar bears have actually been observed going in a dead straight line for over 40 kilometers towards the carcass of a seal or a whale that they wouldn't have been able to see. And They probably don't have that much better a sense of smell than their close cousins, the brown bears, but in the Arctic where they live, where there's very little pollution, very little mingled scents, they have a very strong sense of smell. Of course, the teeth are always what catch my attention. I mean, the carnassials are quite impressive, but for me, it's the canine teeth. These right here, they are enormous. Probably a little bit longer than my little finger, about the same length as my little finger. And those are driven by enormous muscles that can bite, that have the strongest bite of any bear, and certainly strong enough to bite through flesh, bone and blubber. And of course, polar bears, when I said about them being the only purely carnivorous bears, that's because I mean, I actually can't think of a single animal in the world that has a greater range in prey size than bears, well, polar bears. I mean, they'll take anything from a bird's egg to hatchling birds, to brindle-bearded seals, to walruses, and even whales that are even bigger than they are. And this is an enormous skull. In fact, because the polar bear is the largest land predator, I mean, well, the largest one alive today. I mean, if anyone else would see this, they'd probably think it's some kind of dinosaur, but actually, this is the skull of the biggest land carnivore ever to walk the earth today. And that has been my presenting the skulls of my Natural-Commodities Collection. I'm going to be doing another full video on the natural commodities a bit later on, so stay tuned for that. But for now, do drop a comment down below and check out my other videos. Bye now.